Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 13, which is titled Generosity. We're going to be studying chapters 11 through 20 today. And as I mentioned, this is in the words of the Buddha, the Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden Book series. You can download this for free from our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. You can take it and go print that file if you like. You can get printed versions here at the temple in Chiang Mai, or you can order them on Amazon. So you can be reading the words of the Buddha, you have the references there, and you even have words from me to be able to help you to better understand these chapters. As part of our class today, I'm going to be reading the chapters for you, and then I will be sharing some teachings on those chapters and then opening up to any and all questions that you have. Whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions by putting that into the comment section. And in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So we're going to be starting off with chapter 11 today. And as I mentioned, this is in the 13th book, which is titled Generosity. So these chapters are all around generosity. Some really wonderful teachings from the Buddha, as all of his teachings are. You're going to be able to learn some important things about the cause and effect, or action and result, this natural law of karma, that the Buddha is teaching you how generosity leads to certain benefits and certain results. The main benefit that it's providing you is training your mind to let go. It's training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, the cause of all discontentedness. But there's other benefits and there's other things that you would need to know as well in order to fully be practicing generosity and understand how it's improving your practice and helping you get closer and closer to enlightenment. I'm just going to make a little bit of an adjustment here on my screen, and then, okay, we'll be ready to go here. All right. Well, let's go with this first chapter, chapter 11, which is titled 4 Means of Sustaining Favorable Relationship. Monks, there are these 4 means of sustaining a favorable relationship. What for? Giving, endearing speech, beneficent conduct, and equality. These are the 4 means of sustaining a favorable relationship. Giving, endearing speech, beneficent conduct, and equality under diverse worldly conditions as is suitable to fit each case. These means of sustaining a favorable relationship are like the linchpin of a rolling chariot. If there were no such means of sustaining a favorable relationship, neither mother nor father would be able to obtain admiration and respect from their children. But since there exist these means of sustaining a favorable relationship, wise people respect them. Thus, they attain to greatness and are highly praised. So here the Buddha is giving you 4 things that will lead to you having harmonious relationships. And the first one he mentions here is giving. This is the practice of generosity. What generosity is where you're giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without anything expected in return, such as your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources. This is how you train your mind to let go, training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, along with all the other teachings that the Buddha shares. So when you practice generosity in your relationships, people look at you as not just wanting something from them, but instead you're contributing to their life. And you shouldn't be giving because you're trying to get people to be your friend, but the Buddha is showing you this cause and effect in terms of if you're interested in learning how to produce harmonious relationships, one aspect of that is to practice generosity in your relationships, whether it's your parents, your siblings, your life partner, your children, your boss, your coworkers, your teachers, other people around you, maybe your coworkers, neighbors, friends, even people you don't know. You could practice giving, but the Buddha specifically here is talking about the relationships that you have. So you're going to the store and you're picking up something for yourself. Why not bring something back for your coworkers or your life partner or your children or any other person that might be in your life? This is a great way to practice generosity, that you're already out and about, you're already picking up some things for yourself. It's really easy to just add a few things for somebody else perhaps. Or if you're buying a bag of potato chips for yourself, maybe you buy an extra bag or 2 for the other workers in your work environment as well, right? So this can be a great way for you to practice generosity. Then the Buddha is talking about endearing speech. This is where you're learning how to speak in ways that are wise. The Buddha teaches you this in the core central teaching of the Eightfold Path, where he teaches you right speech, where he teaches you to eliminate lying, slander, which is like gossip, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. But then more deeply, he's teaching you the 5 factors of well-spoken speech: to speak at the right time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. And you can go into volume 1, chapter 5 of this book series to be able to find the details on right speech, because that's something that's covered in all of our foundational programs, where you're going to need to learn how to practice right speech, because when you're practicing wisely to speak in endearing ways in your relationships, this is going to promote harmony in your relationships. And then the Buddha is saying here, beneficent conduct, which is the moral conduct, which is right action. That you're not causing harm through your speech, you're not causing harm through your bodily actions, and this is going to produce harmonious relationships. And then this equality is in terms of how you treat the people around you and how you think about the people around you. That oftentimes in relationships, people might put themselves above others, or you might put yourself below others. And both of those are just as dangerous for your mind and for your relationships as well. If you put yourself above people and you talk down to people, this isn't going to promote harmonious relationships. But also if you put yourself below people, meaning like your boss, maybe you think they're so far above you and you get nervous and shaken up when you're around them, this isn't going to promote harmonious relationships. Or say there's a certain politician or famous celebrity or somebody else that you really admire. If you get shaken up around this person, you're not practicing equality and thinking of all beings as equal. And also, if you're in any kind of relationships or something like this, you should think of your partner as being equal, where sometimes people have the misperception that somehow 2,500 years ago, the Buddha taught in a way that denigrates women or denigrates other people. This isn't actually true. If you read his teachings, you'll never see anywhere that he's denigrating or demeaning or degrading to anybody. He doesn't diminish other people. An enlightened being doesn't treat others in that way. And you can see here in his own words that he teaches people to treat each other with equality. You can see in places in the teachings of the Buddha where he teaches men to respect their wives, and he teaches wives to respect their husbands and any partners or children. He teaches everybody to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everybody. So there isn't this pecking order. Oftentimes that's what the mind wants to do when it has conceit or it's judging other people. You might be thinking there's this pecking order, and this is going to just hinder you from seeing all beings as equal and having harmonious relationships. You can see here that the Buddha is saying that in terms of producing these harmonious relationships or these favorable relationships, that these 4 qualities in your relationships are like the linchpin of a rolling chariot. A chariot is pulled by a horse, and there's a pin that connects the horse, the yoke and all the things that the horse is pulling. It connects it to the chariot. And if you pull that linchpin out, then the whole thing disassembles and you're not going to be able to move forward in this rolling chariot. So the linchpin is what holds it all together. So the Buddha is saying here that these 4 qualities are what holds your relationship together. This is the linchpin in your relationships. So whether it's your life partner, your children, your coworkers, your parents, your siblings, your boss, your coworkers, your neighbors, if you're practicing generosity, endearing speech, beneficent conduct, and equality, you'll be able to see that it promotes harmonious relationships. And this is the cause and effect, or action and result, that is part of the natural law of Gama. The Buddha is exposing you to that and then inviting you to examine it, to reflect on it, to independently verify it, and then practice it so that you can see the truth for yourself. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is volume 13, chapter 11. Okay, looks like we have something coming in here from Swiss Cheese on YouTube. What are the results someone might have after giving and sharing with the intention of getting something in return? So the result that they're going to experience, because there's an expectation, is that they're not going to always get what they want back. So because of that, they're going to get frustrated and agitated and annoyed. So sometimes I give a simple example. Like if you practice just some simple generosity where you're holding the door for somebody at a store and maybe they're coming in behind you. Well, if you have the expectation that they're going to say thank you, in some situations they're going to say thank you, and in some situations they're not. So therefore, when they don't say thank you, you're going to be frustrated and agitated and annoyed because you're holding the door because you want something from this person. You can't even get to the point where if you're practicing true generosity, you don't even have an expectation of a thank you. You're just practicing generosity because you're understanding it's enhancing your mind. So if you want something back for the generosity that you're practicing, you're going to experience discontentedness. That's the number one thing that you're going to experience in terms of unwholesome karma, because you can't get your expectations met all the time. And when they are met, you'll get happy and excited. And when they aren't met, you're going to get sad and frustrated. So you need to get rid of any kind of expectations related to generosity so that you can experience the pure generosity. And then because of that, you're training your mind to let go of craving, desire, attachment, and not holding on, wanting and expecting things in return. Okay. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 12. This one is titled 3 Things Prescribed by the Wise. Monks, there are these 3 things prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. What 3? 1. Giving is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. 2. The going forth is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. 3. Attending upon one's mother and father is prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. These 3 things are prescribed by the wise, prescribed by wholesome people. Wholesome people prescribe giving, harmlessness, mental discipline, and mental restraint, service to one's mother and father, and to the peaceful practitioners of the spiritual life. These are the deeds of the good which the wise person should pursue. The noble one, possessed of vision, goes to a heavenly world. So here, let me explain these here. These are very similar to the ones we've just been talking about, at least this one here, which is giving, the generosity, right? We've been talking about that. That's what this whole book is about. Here, the going forth, what the Buddha is describing here is someone ordaining. He's saying this is prescribed by the wise, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, to get to enlightenment, it was more likely to occur if you ordained, because during that time frame, 2,500 years ago, household practitioners were very busy with just collecting water and bringing it to the house. This would often be 2 or 3 days of your week. Maybe for the Monday, you would go spend a half a day or a full day carrying water back and forth to your house. And then maybe that would run out on Wednesday or Thursday and you needed to go do it again, right? And you might need to do it again sometime over the weekend. Nowadays, we don't have to do that, right? We can just walk over and turn a spigot and boom, we've got water in our house right away. Well, it wasn't just water that they had to get. That was just a basic thing, right? They needed to also get seeds, plant those seeds, nurture those seeds, grow them, harvest the vegetables or fruit. They needed to prepare the food. They needed to make their own clothes. There is so much time and effort involved in just sustaining your life. So in order to get to enlightenment during the lifetime of the Buddha, many people would ordain, which means walking away from their household life and moving into this homelessness where they're no longer are living a household life. Their lodging, their food, their clothing, their medical care, all this is provided for you. You just focus on getting to enlightenment. And having done so, then you would have the wisdom to be able to help other people in the household life to be able to learn, or other people in the ordained life. So going forth or ordaining was very common during the lifetime of the Buddha, and a lot of those people were the ones who were getting to enlightenment. But also household practitioners would get to enlightenment too. Nowadays, the likelihood of a household practitioner getting to enlightenment is very much increased compared to during the lifetime of the Buddha, because we have so many modern conveniences in terms of acquiring food or clothing or water or anything else that we need. It's very easy for us. We have so much time in the household life that we tend to fill it up with unbeneficial things. This is why you might be searching social media for 3, 4, 5 hours, or watching YouTube for that period of time. There's no harm in doing these kinds of things, but when you do it for an exorbitant amount of time, it's taking away from other beneficial things that you could be doing that are really going to benefit your life, like training your mind with meditation, reading the teachings of the Buddha, coming to classes like this, watching videos or listening to podcasts or things of that nature. So a household practitioner it's very possible for them to get to enlightenment today, even more so than during the lifetime of the Buddha. Then the Buddha says, okay, another thing that is very helpful for you and prescribed by the wise is attending to one's mother and father, right? This is like taking care of your mother and father. During the lifetime of the Buddha, people would definitely take care of their parents. And nowadays we have a lot of strained relationships between parents and their children, or even between mother and father themselves, because people have gotten so far away from the teachings of the Buddha, they don't know how to have harmonious relationships with each other, maybe the mother and father, or the children and the parents. Maybe they're at odds with each other, because if you have expectations of your parents and what they should and shouldn't do, they're never going to meet your expectations 100% of the time. So therefore, when they don't do the things the way that you want them to do it, you'll be angry and frustrated and agitated or annoyed. And the same thing with parents, that parents seeing their children not doing the things that the parents want and expect them to do, they will be angry and frustrated and agitated and annoyed with their children. But if you attend to your parents, the reason why the Buddha is teaching you this is because the parents are the ones who provided you the ability to come into the world and learn and grow and develop and have this human life, where now you have the opportunity to be able to get to enlightenment. Where if they didn't do the hard work that they did in order to bring you into the world, sustain your life, and now get you to the point where you can sustain your own life, you wouldn't be able to have the opportunity to learn these teachings, to grow and develop, to evolve, and to actually get to enlightenment and escape this whole cycle of rebirth. So there's almost like this debt of gratitude that the Buddha teaches of one's parents, that you have this debt of gratitude towards them. And of course, nowadays, there's even some parents who might sexually abuse their children or physically abuse or otherwise abuse their children. And in these situations, you're going to need to most likely choose to go away from your parents and get safe, right? And you may not be doing what the Buddha is describing here. But if it's just that your parents aren't meeting your expectations and the things you want from them, you can eliminate this and you can cultivate a really wonderful relationship with your parents. So you'll need to look at your relationships in all parts of your life as you make your way to enlightenment. And there are certain relationships that you're going to let go of and you're just going to move on from, because you're not committed to the relationship. There's too much hostility and bitterness in the relationship, and it's better to just let go and move on. And then there's a second category of relationships, of ones that maybe they're problematic right now, but you're willing to do the work and you're committed to the relationship. And you might just mentally put this relationship on pause, step away from it without necessarily telling the person that's what you're doing, and do some work to improve the condition of your mind over many months and years. Then you might decide to come back into the relationship, and now you'll be better at having that relationship in a harmonious way, because you've learned and grown and you've trained your mind to the point where you don't have attachment perhaps, and now you can function in that relationship with more harmony. And then there's a third category of relationships that you're going to need to look at and understand that this is part of the journey to enlightenment, that there's going to be new people that you meet that are brand new people that you don't even know their names yet. You haven't even met them yet. But as you're learning and growing on this path, you're going to start meeting people, and you'll only ever be loving and kind to those people. And therefore your relationships will go really, really well. So these are the three categories of individuals, and your parents might be in that second category of where you have some difficulties in your relationship. Maybe you need to mentally put that on pause, or maybe you already have. And now you need to step away, do some work on your mind. And then at some point you can come back into the relationship and now resume with a better mind, where you don't have these expectations and wants and things like this. And you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile to your family, and specifically your parents. Eventually the Buddha comes down here and he says, okay, wholesome people prescribe giving, which is the generosity, practicing harmlessness, which is part of right intention from the Eightfold Path, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm, where you practice mental discipline, which is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration from the Eightfold Path. And then that mental restraint is the same thing, is that you're restraining the mind as part of that mental discipline, because your mind's going to be longing and yearning and chasing after your cravings, desires, attachments. But if you can have this mental restraint where you pull the mind back, this is going to help you to eliminate cravings, desires, attachments, and ultimately get to more and more peace and joy. And then service to one's mother and father, and to peaceful practitioners of the spiritual life, that you practice the giving and sharing and practicing all these other qualities with people who are on the path, people who are in your community of learning and growing in these teachings. And the Buddha is saying, okay, this particular individual is experiencing this, continuous pursuit of growing and developing with these certain qualities. And he says, the noble one possessed of vision goes to a heavenly world. What he means by vision is he's talking about being able to see the natural laws very clearly, that you can see the path to enlightenment. Because when your mind is polluted and you're not on this path, you can't see very clearly of what is wise and unwise. But as you remove more and more of the pollution out of the mind, you can see this natural law very clearly, and now you have clear vision. So a noble one, meaning someone who's practicing the teachings very closely, possessed of vision, meaning can see this natural laws very clearly, the Buddha is saying, okay, goes to a heavenly world. Now remember, this isn't the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha, to be reborn in heaven. The goal is to get to enlightenment in this life, and you can see your mind doing that as you're becoming more and more wise. You're training your mind. The mind's eradicating more and more pollution. But as I've shared many, many times, the same things that lead to enlightenment are the same things that, if you fall short of enlightenment, will lead to a rebirth in the heavenly world. So the Buddha is basically essentially sharing with you that, okay, if you practice giving and some of these other things that he's talking about here, that these things will lead to a heavenly rebirth. But it's also the same things that lead to enlightenment too. So rather than just stop with these few things that he's teaching you here, instead practice all the teachings, the Eightfold Path. That's what's going to fully purify the mind, and then get to enlightenment in this life and be able to see that that's occurring as the mind's becoming more peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 12. 3 things prescribed by the wise. Okay, we have another question here from Swiss Cheese. Is seeing the natural laws of Gama clearly a part of right view? If you look at the teachings of the Buddha on the Eightfold Path, right view is purely the Four Noble Truths, right? The problem in the mind, the cause of the problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. But if you would like to expand your view of what is right view, then you could include understanding and practicing the natural law of Gama as part of right view. But in terms of just getting established in right view, you're not going to be able to be fully awake of the natural law of Gama or fully wise to the natural law of Gama when you first getting started. But in terms of just getting started on the Eightfold Path and getting established in right view, it's the Four Noble Truths. But as you move closer and closer to that first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to practice what's called accomplishment in view. This is another layer beyond just right view, that you don't just understand the Four Noble Truths, but you understand a whole lot of other things related to things like the natural law of Gama. And that's where, by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have accomplishment in view. And it's an expanded understanding of what is right view beyond just what's described in the Eightfold Path. So the short answer to your question is yes, but the longer answer is there's this establishment in right view that happens with just the Four Noble Truths, but then there's the accomplishment in view that happens as you more fully understand things like the natural law of Gama and other things, making your way to accomplishment in view by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. And you can learn about this through this book series, and even in the retreat that I teach in January. There's a retreat that I teach which is everything up to the first stage of enlightenment, and in there I talk about what is accomplishment in view. And that's been taught in the past and it's been recorded. So if you would like to see that, you can watch it on YouTube or listen to it on our podcast, and you can see what I've taught related to that. or you can schedule personal guidance or ask follow-up questions, and we can talk some more about accomplishment in view. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So we'll move on to chapter 13. This one is titled, One Who Has Trust and Confidence. Monks, in 3 cases, one may be understood to have dedication and confidence. What 3? When one aspires to see those of virtuous behavior, practicing moral conduct, when one aspires to hear the good wholesome teachings, and when one resides at home with a mind free of the stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in letting go, devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. In these 3 cases, one may be understood to have trust and confidence. One who aspires to see the virtuous ones, who aspires to hear the good wholesome teachings, who has removed the stain of selfishness, is called a person endowed with dedication. So in order to get to enlightenment, one of the things that you need to do is you need to eliminate the fetter or the taint or the pollution of doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the Buddha, you have doubt about his teachings, you have doubt about the community that you're part of, you have doubt about your teacher and their ability to help you get to enlightenment, and you have doubt about your own ability to get to enlightenment. If you have doubt in your mind, which most people do when they first come to the path to enlightenment, this is going to hinder you or obstruct you from being able to get to enlightenment because you have doubt in all these things. But the way you eliminate doubt is not through blind belief or faith. The way you do that is the way the Buddha is talking here, is that you have this aspiration to see the virtuous ones or the ones practicing virtuous behavior. This would be people who are in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. The first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment, these people are going to be practicing very closely the teachings of the Buddha, and they're going to be practicing virtuous moral conduct or practicing this wholesome moral conduct. And this is where you're going to be able to then learn what that moral conduct is. And then when one aspires to hear the good teachings, the wholesome teachings, this means that you're interested in hearing the teachings, that you're examining them, you're investigating them, you're reflecting on them to independently verify them. And then the third one is where you're practicing the teachings, you're practicing generosity, you're giving and sharing and allowing your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. This is where you're going to slowly be able to build your trust and confidence in the teachings because you will see the condition of the mind gradually improving. As you improve your moral conduct and you're shutting down the harmful things that you're causing others in the world, wherever you're causing harm, you're now making the wise decision to practice wholesome moral conduct. As you're shutting that down more and more, you're going to see more and more wholesome results coming back to you because you're not putting out harm in the world. As you're listening to the good teachings and hearing them, reflecting on them, you're examining them, investigating them, independently verify them, and then you're starting to practice them through your generosity and other things as well, that this is how you eliminate the doubt in the mind, is through developing your practice, examining the teachings, investigating them. And then as you're seeing more and more improvement to the condition of the mind, because you're practicing virtuous moral conduct, because you're listening and examining the teachings, independently reflecting on them, and you're starting to practice them to include generosity, this is where more and more trust and confidence is arisen in the mind. And now you'll get to a point where you have no doubt that this person, Gautama Buddha, lived. Because here you are learning his teachings, you're independently verifying them, you're practicing them, and you see the condition of your mind improving, you will have no doubt that he existed during his lifetime and he shared these teachings, because here you are 2,500 years later learning them and seeing the benefit. You'll have no doubt in his teachings because you'll have seen that they're so true and you've independently verified them. You'll have no doubt in the community that you're part of because you will see people supporting you and encouraging you, helping you along on the path. You will have seen wholesome moral conduct in other people, and now those people are ones that you're actually learning from. You're seeing people within our community practicing the teachings. You're like, oh, I really like how they talk so polite and kind. I think I'm going to do some of that. And then you'll start having confidence in your teacher because that's the person who helped guide you to the point where your mind is improving. And then you'll have confidence in your own ability to get to enlightenment, because you'll see that your mind is starting to awaken slowly but surely, and more of the qualities of enlightenment are shining through examining the teachings and investigating them and practicing them. That's what's going to lead to elimination of this doubt and arise this trust and confidence in the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Again, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. This is from Swiss Cheese on YouTube. Have you ever seen students stop learning because of doubt? Yes, this is a very common reason why students would stop learning, that because of their doubt about any number of those things, whether it's the Buddha, the teachings, the community, maybe me as a teacher, or maybe their own ability to get to enlightenment, they will stop learning and growing. At least with me, I don't know what they'll end up doing with somebody else, because everybody's on their own journey, right? And let's just say they learned with me for 1 week or 1 year or 5 years. Whatever amount that they've learned, this is beneficial for them in their life. As the Buddha shares, that if they understand just one sentence of his teachings, this is helpful for their welfare and peacefulness for a very long time. So if somebody learns for a week or a month or a year or 5 years, whatever amount they've learned, it's helped them to a certain degree. And now they're out there conducting themselves in wiser ways. So I've seen people make a certain amount of progress and improvement in the condition of their life and in their mind. And then maybe 2-3 years into it, somewhere along the line, their doubt comes up, and now they end up leaving from the path to enlightenment, but they're still actually functioning better than they were when they first came to the path. Whether they realize that or not, I'm not sure, but I have seen the improvement to the condition of somebody's mind in that period of time. In a course much shorter than that, but someone who studies for 2 or 3 years closely, they can still have doubt, and it can still hinder them or obstruct them, and they might choose to leave the path to enlightenment because of that. Okay, not seeing any other questions anywhere, so we'll move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 14. This one is titled Practicing the Way. It looks like Keely maybe is going to be interested in reading this one. Are you reading this one, Keely?
Yes.
Okay.
David?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Practicing the way proper to the household practitioner. Householder, a noble disciple who possesses 4 qualities, is practicing the way proper to the household practitioner, a way that brings the attainment of fame and leads to heaven. What for? Here, householder. A noble disciple serves the community of monks with robes. He serves the community of monks with almsfood. He serves the community of monks with lodgings. He serves the community of monks with medicines and provisions for the sick. Householder, a noble disciple who possesses these 4 qualities, is practicing the way proper to the household practitioner, a way that brings the attainment of fame and leads to heaven. When the wise practice the way proper for the household practitioner, they serve the virtuous monks of upright conduct with robes, almsfood, lodgings, and medicines. For them, both by day and night, merit always increases. Having done excellent deeds, they pass on to the heavenly realm.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So here the Buddha is describing how a household practitioner would practice some of these qualities. And of course, there's all kinds of qualities that a household practitioner would practice, but here's just kind of the Buddha focusing in on some of those. And of course, he's saying this leads to fame and it leads to heavenly rebirth. Again, that's not the ultimate goal of the path to enlightenment, but the same things that lead to enlightenment lead to an improved rebirth as well, in terms of maybe in your next life, maybe you're more famous, or maybe you're reborn in the heavenly world, which is very pleasant, right? But that's not a permanent existence, and you're still in the cycle of rebirth, and you need to get to enlightenment. I consider the human realm to be the ideal existence. And I've seen where the Buddha talks about this too, that in the human realm, you have pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. So you have built-in motivation to be able to get to enlightenment because you don't like those painful feelings and you don't like those painful nor pleasant feelings. But in the heavenly realm, they're only experiencing pleasant feelings, so they tend to have complacency where they're not interested and motivated and encouraged to actually get to enlightenment. And there's a lot of people who might be interested in fame, but this isn't necessarily going to lead to anything beneficial. It doesn't mean that, fame is bad or anything like that. But if you want or expect to be famous, then there's a craving there. So there's nothing that's going to come in terms of peacefulness and joy with fame if you base your inner feelings based on that. This is why people who become really, really famous really quick, oftentimes they go up really high and have all these pleasant feelings, but then they kind of drop off as well. Sometimes you might see drug abuse with people who they've peaked in their career, and then now their fame is starting to wane and they're no longer getting those pleasant feelings anymore from their craving of having fame. So now they might turn to drugs or alcohol or something like this in order to produce those pleasant feelings, because that craving is no longer being fulfilled because they've already reached the height of their fame, and now they might crash on the other side of that. So if you base your inner feelings on the fame, then that means that it's only a matter of time before that craving either extinguishes or your feeling moves and changes from the pleasantness when you became really famous. But then when your fame wanes and you're no longer famous, now the painful feelings are going to set in. So while the Buddha is talking about this leads to fame and it leads to a heavenly rebirth, that's not the ultimate goal. He's basically just sharing with you what are the ways that a household practitioner would practice. And then he's describing some of the things that this leads to in terms of the cause and effect. So here he's saying that a household practitioner would serve the noble disciples, right? The community of monks with robes, serves them with alms food, serves them with lodging, and then with medicines and provisions for the sick. This is how we as household practitioners create this womb that is available for everybody to be able to enter into and learn and grow and develop and exit out of at any time that you'd like. So it's the offerings from the household practitioners that creates this womb. If you think about a mother's womb, it's the perfect environment for a child to grow and develop and become an actual human being. In the monastery, or ordaining, the way I think about it, should be the perfect environment for individuals to enter into and grow into a better and better and better individual. And it's these offerings that the Buddha is describing here that is going to produce that womb and create that womb in a community. So here in Thailand, we have over 30,000 temples that are all supported by the donations of all the people around. And those people are practicing generosity and helping their minds get closer and closer to enlightenment. But then there's this womb available for people to go enter into and learn and grow and develop. The temple where I teach, it's supported by the students there, and the students who support me, it helps to support that temple and the electric and the water and providing that learning resource there, the meditation cushions, the projector, and all the things that are needed in order to share the teachings. And people can enter into that womb for a couple of hours, or, if people decide to ordain at some point, they might enter into that womb for much longer. So that womb is there. And for the students who come learn with me, they come in for a few hours or a few days and they learn, and then they grow and they develop and they leave. And then they always have the opportunity to continue to do that. So it's our offerings that help to create this. And that's where you're practicing generosity, but it's creating this benefit of allowing the teachings to continue in the world. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 14, practicing the way proper to the household practitioner. Let's see, we have a question here again from Swiss Cheese. What does it mean when he says that your merit increases by day and night? Okay, so here, let me see where that is. I didn't recall seeing that. Let me see. Here we go. When the wise practice the way proper for the household practitioner, they serve the virtuous monks of upright conduct with robes, alms, food, lodging, and medicines. For them, both by day and night, merit increases, always increases. having done excellent deeds, they pass on to the heavenly realm. What he's saying here, I think, is that basically all throughout your day that you're practicing making these offerings. Maybe like in the morning, you might practice making these offerings, but then the quality of your mind is improving because you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment by you practicing generosity, which is what produces merit. What merit is it's a practice of generosity directed towards the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha. So if you're practicing generosity, say, with a homeless person or your mom or your dad, you're practicing generosity and it's helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. And this is important for you to do in order to make your way towards enlightenment. But also a certain amount of your generosity might be directed towards the continued sharing of the teachings of the Buddha. And as you do so, this is also helping you with craving, desire, attachment, eliminating that from your own mind, but also it's helping to make the teachings available for other people to be able to then learn and grow and develop in the teachings. So if you're supporting the ordained practitioners or teachers to be able to share the teachings, your merit or the beneficial results of your generosity are, increasing day and night, meaning all throughout the day, because you're able to support people in their journey to be able to get closer and closer to enlightenment. And as they do, their wisdom's improving, and now that wisdom is available to other people to be able to learn and practice to get to enlightenment. All right, great question there. So let's move to this next one, which is a chapter we've studied before just recently, but we can study it here again as well. Let's see. This one is chapter 15, and Keely would like to read, so go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, David. Actually, I can read all the chapters if nobody will read it.
Okay, sure. Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Mutual support between monks, Brahmins, and householders. Monks, Brahmins, and householders are very helpful to you. They provide you with the requisites of robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines in time of sickness. And you, monks, are very helpful to Brahmins and householders, as you teach them the teachings that are good in the beginning, the middle, and the end, with the correct meaning and wording. And you proclaim the spiritual life in its fulfillment and complete purity. Thus, monks, this spiritual life is lived with mutual support for the purpose of crossing the flood and making a complete end of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So here the Buddha is reminding his students how household practitioners and Brahmin are very important for them. There's this mutual support that the Buddha built in. First of all, what Brahmin are, these are what we might refer to as Hindu priests. These existed during the lifetime of the Buddha, and they exist now too, where they're doing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. They're also teaching a little bit of moral conduct as well to be able to help people. But the vast majority of what they're doing are rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And what people thought during this time is that you could go to a Brahmin, you could pay them, and then they're going to do some ceremony on your behalf, and then your life was supposed to get better. And you became a Brahmin by being born into this family. That is thought that if you were born into this family, you were a holy person and you had the ability to perform these ceremonies and you were able to help people through these ceremonies. But the Buddha knew that this wasn't true, and it wasn't true reality that people's life would improve that way. But it was going on for many generations, and the Buddha was teaching his teachings based on the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. And these Brahmin, even though they were doing this type of thing, they would oftentimes come to the Buddha to learn his particular teachings. And as you can see here, they, as well as household practitioners, would support the ordained practitioners with robes, food, lodging, and medicine to be able to sustain their life and continue to share the teachings. So the Buddha is reminding his students that monks, these Brahmin and householders, you're very helpful to them because you're teaching them the teachings. You're sharing these teachings that are going to lead to the enlightened mind, that you teach these teachings that are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. This is the way the Buddha would teach to be able to share the teachings, that you shouldn't start off really strong in your classes and then kind of wane off at the end, or start off kind of weak and then peak towards the end. But instead, as you're teaching, it should be good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. And as you're sharing those teachings with the students here, the Brahmin and the householders, they're learning more and more about this spiritual life, about how to purify your mind and how to get closer and closer to enlightenment. And that's the way of helping the community. And you need to be able, as a teacher, to have the correct meaning and wording, that you're not just haphazardly teaching, but you're very conscious and very aware of the wording and the phrasing that you're using as you're describing the teachings to your students. And then because of this, and the teachers are practicing generosity, then the students are also practicing generosity too. They're providing support of food, of robes, of lodging, of medicines. There's this mutual support that's built in. So together, between the household practitioners providing this support, that they're providing these particular offerings, and then the teachers are providing the teachings, together everybody's getting closer and closer to enlightenment. Because with the household practitioners practicing generosity, that's helping them to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. But then also the teachers are practicing generosity too, that they're sharing the teachings without any expectation of anything in return. And now this helps one to be able to then get closer and closer to enlightenment, both as a household practitioner or any particular teacher. As the teacher is becoming more and more wise because of the womb that their students are providing them, the teacher should have utmost respect and gratitude to their students, because it was them providing this womb that allowed that teacher to then get closer and closer to enlightenment by spending more and more of their time focused on training their mind. And as a appreciation, the Gama that gets returned to the students is, here's the teachings that it takes to get to enlightenment. Since all of you helped provide these offerings that helped this teacher to be able to get to enlightenment, now that teacher should then share the teachings back with their students to be able to help them get closer and closer to enlightenment. So that's how all of this works. And the Buddha started this from during his lifetime, that he left the royal palace, entered into this life of homelessness, and accepted offerings. But he then shared teachings that would help people to be able to get closer and closer to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. It's titled Mutual Support Between Monks, Brahmins, and Householders. Okay, here we've got another question. Does crossing the flood mean, let's see, there's a little icon that's hiding some of your words there. Does crossing the flood mean to the process of eliminating discontentedness? Yes, because if you think about, like a river that's flooding, this is a real challenge to be able to get across and get to the other side. To be able to get to the other side is to get to the other side of this discontentedness, to get to the other side of the craving, desire, attachment. That's the process of getting to enlightenment. That's what it means to cross the flood, that you're eliminating your discontentedness through overcoming this struggle, overcoming this obstacle of this flood. Because if you came to a flooded road and you're driving in a car, this is now an obstacle that you need to overcome. And you need to make wise decisions to overcome that. And maybe you actually turn around and go back, right? And if you're in a real car. But if there was no other way to go back, you're going to need to figure out a way to get across this flood. Well, the same thing is true with this struggle and difficulty within your own mind, that the teachings are helping you to be able to overcome that and move past that. Okay? All right. So now we'll move on to the next one. And once I get down here, Keely, you're welcome to start reading it. There's a lot here to take in. Chapter 16. Okay, if you'd like to read that one, ma'am.
Yes, David. All worthy deeds to be undertaken with wealth, householder with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow. Righteous wealth, righteous gain. The noble disciple undertakes 4 worthy deeds. What for? 1. Here, householder with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow. righteous while righteously gained. The noble disciple makes himself content and pleased, and properly maintains himself in contentedness. He makes his parents content and pleased, and properly maintains them in contentedness. He makes his wife and children, his slaves, workers, and servants content and pleased, and properly maintains them in contentedness. He makes his friends and companions content and pleased, and properly maintains them in contentedness. This is the first case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly utilized and used for a worthy cause. 2. Again, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth righteously gained, the noble disciple makes provision against the losses that might arise from fire, floods, kings, thieves, or displeasing heirs. He makes himself secure against them. This is the second case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly employed and used for a worthy cause. 3. Again, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth righteously gained, the noble disciples makes the 5 offerings to relatives, guests, ancestors, the king, and the deities. This is the third case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly employed and used for a worthy cause. 4. Again, with wealth acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth righteously gained, the noble disciple establishes an uplifting offering of alms, a donation, an offering that is heavenly, resulting in contentedness, conducive to heaven, to those ascetics and Brahmins who refrain from intoxications and hedonism, who are settled in patience and gentleness, who tame the mind, calm the mind, and train the mind for nibbana, enlightenment. This is the fourth case of wealth that has gone to good use, that has been properly employed and used for a worthy cause. This, householder, are the 4 worthy deeds that the noble disciple undertakes with wealth and acquired by energetic striving, amassed by the strength of his arms, earned by the sweat of his brow, righteous wealth righteously gained. But when anyone exhausts wealth on these 4 worthy deeds, this wealth is said to have gone to good use, to have been properly used, to have been utilized for a worthy cause.
Okay, thank you very much, Keely. So here, the Buddha is essentially helping you learn how to practice generosity from the middle way. That he's giving you these 4 ways of using wealth in a helpful way, but he's also talking about the middle way in terms of giving and producing this merit. Because sometimes people are taught to just give and 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 give, and you might exhaust your resources. He also teaches teachers that as students are giving, to not just, do what we refer to as milk dry, where you dry out the milk of the cow, that in order for a student to be whole, they need to have money for themselves. So here, the Buddha is giving you details on this, because as a teacher, if a student is overextending themselves because they're not yet practicing the middle way, a teacher needs to be wiser and be able to see that. Like just today, I was at lunch and a student, as we first ordered, said, I'm going to pay everything for our meal. And I said, maybe you should look at the bill first, because I know this person's quite young and they don't have that much money. And I was like, maybe you should look at the bill first before you offer. Maybe that's something you might consider. And he's like, yeah, that's actually a good idea. And then when the bill actually came, he was like, okay, I can pay, this amount of it, which was like 70% of it, 75% of it. And that's what a teacher that's not milk drying would do, that they're not just gimme, money, me, but instead a teacher should be observant of their students and ensure that they're not functioning through craving, desire, attachment when they're practicing generosity. ultimately the responsibility is to the student. The student needs to have that decision-making ability, but a wise teacher, knowing their students, should be able to observe this kind of thing. And then as the student is learning, as a household practitioner is learning and growing and practicing this generosity, the Buddha here is providing you guidance of how to use your wealth in wise ways. In the first way, he says, okay, use your wealth in order to maintain yourself and your family, your relatives, people that are close to you, like your employees and people like this. Because if you, your family, and your employees aren't whole, then you're not going to be able to go out into the world and continue to make more and more income in order to support yourself and any other activities that you might have underway. So the Buddha puts that as a first priority, making sure you're whole first. Then the second one, he says, okay, once you have wealth, it's important to protect it against fire, floods, kings, thieves, and displeasing heirs. What we might think about here is like nowadays we might have insurance, right, in order to protect our property against fire or floods. Not that you're required to have insurance, but that's kind of an advisement of the Buddha, a suggestion. During the lifetime of the Buddha, you would need to protect your wealth from kings because they could just come in and take it. Nowadays, we might think about this as in terms of the government, right, that the government might come in and try to take your money if you haven't paid your taxes. So you need to be sure that you're properly attending to whatever obligations you have with your government so that they don't just come in and start taking all your money. And then, of course, thieves, the way that you can protect your wealth there is maybe you have a bank or a safety deposit box or some other way to protect your asset. And then displeasing heirs would be to have a will, perhaps, and maybe even communicate what that will has in it before you actually die. Because if it's a big surprise and you die, then people can not be knowing what to expect. And then when you're dead, your relatives are fighting over the money that you've left behind. So if you make it really well known through a will, and you make it really well known with your relatives of what you've chosen to do, when you die, it won't be a surprise to anybody, right? So this is a second thing the Buddha is suggesting that you do. Then the third thing that he's talking about here is making offerings. And this is where some of your generosity comes in. He talks about making offerings to relatives. This would be like your family. This would be guests, right? Like your friends that you invite over to your house, ancestors. Then he talks about the king, right? Because you need to keep the king happy during those time frames. And then here he talks about deities, which I don't really see him talking about that very much anywhere. And I don't know whether this has been added or whether this is truly something that he taught during his lifetime, because in terms of the teachings of the Buddha, he doesn't teach you to make offerings to deities because these things aren't what leads to improvement to the condition of your mind. So I've always been surprised of seeing that there. But nonetheless, that's what's there in the Pali Canon. And sometimes these things can be modified as they go through history. But then fourth, what he's saying, okay, when all of those things are taken care of, then that's where you make offerings to the people who are sharing the teachings that are helping you to be able to get closer and closer to enlightenment, because you've got all these other things taken care of. Sometimes people put this in, they have it not in the same priority that the Buddha has it in. And it's important to see that the Buddha put himself as last. He's saying, take care of yourself, your family, your workers, all of those people. Make sure you protect your wealth against fire, floods, thieves, and people like that. Make sure you make offerings to your family and your relatives and those kinds of people. And then that's where you can make offerings or a donation to people who are sharing the teachings. And this is very wise to kind of function in this way. So this is what the Buddha is teaching you about how to use wealth in a wise way. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 16, 4 worthy deeds to be undertaken with wealth. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So we'll move on to chapter 17. Okay. Now, Keely, let me just look at this for a moment for chapter 17, because it might be just the opposite of the one that we just read. It's somewhat opposite, but let's go ahead and read it so that you can, and other people can get an opportunity to study it. So go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. Wealth being used properly goes to utilization, not to waste. But great king, when a wholesome man gains abundant wealth, he makes himself peaceful and pleased, and he makes his mother and father peaceful and pleased, and his wife and children, and his slaves, workers and servants, and his friends and colleagues, and he establishes an offering for ascetics and Brahmins, one leading upwards of heavenly fruit, resulting in peacefulness, conducive to heaven, because his wealth is being used properly. Kings do not take it away, thieves do not take it away, fires does not burn it, water does not carry it away, and displeased heirs do not take it. Such being the case, great king, that wealth, being used properly, goes to utilization, not to waste. Suppose, great king, not far from a village or a town, there was a lotus pond with clear, cool, sweet, clean water, with good crossings, delightful, and people would take that water and drink it and bathe in it and use it for their purposes. In such a case, great king, that water being used properly would go to utilization, not to waste. So too, great king, when a wholesome man gains abundant wealth, he makes himself peaceful and pleased, and he makes his mother and father peaceful and pleased, and his wife and children, and his slaves, workers, and servants, and his friends and colleagues, and he establishes an offering for ascetics and Brahmins, one leading upwards of heavenly fruit, resulting in peacefulness, conducive to heaven, because his wealth is being used properly. Kings do not take it away, thieves do not take it away, fire does not burn it, water does not carry it away, and displeased heirs do not take it. Such being the case, great king, that wealth being used properly goes to utilization, not to waste.
Okay, thank you, Keely. This is very similar to the last one where the Buddha kind of ordered it in priority, where this is essentially the same exact thing, just kind of described in a different way because he's talking to a different person. Here he's talking to a king and he's describing the same exact teachings, but just in a slightly different way. This is the natural law of karma, and these could have been spread out in his life over multiple years, where when they were being recounted, and then they were included in this book series in the same place so you could be able to see that. So I don't think we need to go through this unless you guys have questions. If there's any questions here, let me know by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, we have another question here from Swiss Cheese. What is heavenly fruit? What this is this is essentially a heavenly rebirth. So here, where is it at? Right here. One leading upwards of heavenly fruit, meaning the benefit of having been reborn in the heavenly realm. That's what the Buddha is referring to here. Okay, let's see if we have any questions on Facebook. I don't see anything there. So let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 18. Okay, go ahead, Keely.
For things leading to welfare and peacefulness in future lives, there are Prayagataja. These four other things that lead to a householder's welfare and peacefulness in future lives. What for? 1. Accomplishment in confidence. 2. Accomplishment in virtuous behavior. 3. Accomplishment in generosity. And 4. Accomplishment in wisdom. And what is accomplishment in confidence? Here, a householder is endowed with confidence. He places confidence in the enlightenment of the Tathagata. Thus, the perfectly enlightened one is an Arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortune, knower of the world, and surpassed the leader of persons to be attained, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the fortunate one, the perfectly enlightened one, This is called accomplishment in confidence. And what is accomplishment in virtuous behavior, moral conduct? Here, a householder abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substance that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. This is called accomplishment in virtual behavior. And what is accomplishment in generosity? Here, a householder resides at home with a mind free of the stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in letting go, one devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. This is called accomplishment in generosity. And what is accomplishment in wisdom? Here, a householder is wise. He possesses the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away, which is noble and penetrative, and leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness. This is called accomplishment in wisdom. These are the four other things that lead to the welfare and peacefulness of a householder in future lives.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So again, the same things that lead to an improved rebirth are the same things that lead to enlightenment as well. You would need all four of these things just in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, let alone enlightenment itself. You're going to need to have accomplishment in confidence, virtuous behavior, generosity, and in wisdom in order to be able to actually get to the first stage of enlightenment. So the Buddha here is casting it in terms of what leads to this future rebirth, but also it's the same things that lead to enlightenment. So I would encourage you to focus on it from that perspective. So anytime you see him talking about confidence, it means confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community. That's what he's describing there. And then your teacher and your own ability to get to enlightenment, you're going to need that confidence. Then this virtuous behavior, here he's referencing essentially the 5 precepts. These are the 5 wise decisions that you can make that are going to produce wholesome results. But if you make them in an unwise way, it's going to produce unwholesome results. These are 5 very impactful decisions that you learn, and he expands upon in the 5 precepts, which I'm going to be teaching in about 1 week. The 1 week from Sunday, this Sunday, tomorrow, 1 week from then, I'm going to be teaching this in the group learning program. And I also have recorded it many times where we use the original words of the Buddha. It's part of Volume 1, Chapter 7, that you can learn about the 5 precepts. Then the whole reason why this is in this particular book is because of this generosity, that in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to practice generosity. And then in order to get to enlightenment itself, you're going to need to be practicing generosity. So that giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return is so important. And doing that frequently, just like you'll notice that meditation is more beneficial the more frequent you do it. So if it's a matter of 1 meditation for 30 minutes a day or 2 for 15 minutes, it's much better to do 2 for 15 minutes. You're going to notice much more benefits that way. The same thing is true with generosity. You're going to need to be practicing it daily. It's not like you do this once a year or once every 6 months or even once a month. You're going to need to be practicing generosity all throughout your week and all throughout your day. Remember, you're sharing your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. And seeing that as being joyful, that there's joy in letting go, that you're devoted to this giving and sharing and having joy in doing so. And then developing the wisdom that it takes to end discontentedness, meaning the wisdom that it takes to get to enlightenment itself. And this leads to the complete destruction of discontentedness. This is where oftentimes people are very confused. They think that enlightened beings still get angry or sad or frustrated, and they don't realize that the path to enlightenment is to completely eliminate all discontentedness. And some people think that the Buddha didn't teach that, but here you can see it in his own words, and as you experience it, you'll know that it's true, because your mind's getting closer and closer to that peace and that joy. But you can see it here that he's talking about this wisdom leads to the complete elimination and destruction of discontentedness, that there is no conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings are neither painful nor pleasant, the conditioned feelings. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're experiencing unconditioned mental qualities that are just permanent and continue to exist in the mind. No matter what's happening in the world, you can maintain your peace and your joy. So let me know what questions you guys have here, if any at all. This is chapter 18, 4 things leading to welfare and peacefulness in future lives. And remember, you can apply this to your current life as well, because this is what leads to enlightenment. Okay, we have a question here from Swiss Cheese. Is wisdom of arising and passing away the same as the wisdom of impermanence? Here, let's see. The wisdom that discerns arising and passing away. Yes, this is the first step, or the first thing you would need to learn in order to get to enlightenment. Even just to get on the path to enlightenment, you would need to understand the universal truth of impermanence. So here the Buddha is describing the very beginning of the path to enlightenment, that his very last words were all about impermanence, because that's the very first point to start on the path to enlightenment. And here, the very first thing to start is understanding the universal truth of impermanence. Okay, so let's move to the next one, which is chapter 19. Okay, go ahead, Kili.
Offering for the heavenly beings, the fortunate one gave thanks thus to Siddhartha and Sankara, the chief ministers of Magadha, after he had finished eating his meal in these verses. In whatever realm the wise man makes his home, he should feed the virtuous leader of the holy life. Whatever heavenly beings there are who report this offering, they will pay him respect and honor for this. They tremble for him as a mother for her son, and he for whom heavenly beings tremble ever happily is.
Okay, thank you. So here, somebody had given the Buddha a meal and he was eating in this person's home. And when he was done, he basically said this. And here he's basically acknowledging that even heavenly beings understand when people are practicing generosity, and they honor and respect that individual for having done so. So let me know if you guys have questions here. Okay. Not seeing any questions here, so let's move on to chapter 20. This is our last one for today.
Without having a selfishness, one is incapable of realizing the fruit of arahantship. Monks, without having abandoned these 5 things, one is incapable of entering and residing in the first jhana, in the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana. One is incapable of realizing the fruit of stream enterer, the fruit of one's returner, the fruit of non-returner, the fruit of arahantship. What 5? Selfishness with regard to dwellings, selfishness with regard to families, selfishness with regard to material possessions, selfishness with regard to praise, and selfishness with regard to the teachings. Monks, having abandoned these 5 things, one is capable of entering and residing in the first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana. One is capable of realizing the fruit of stream enterer, the fruit of one's returner, the fruit of non-returner, the fruit of arahantship. What 5? Selfishness with regard to dwellings, selfishness with regard to families, selfishness with regard to material possessions, selfishness with regard to praise, and selfishness with regard to the teachings. Having abandoned these 5 things, one is capable of realizing the fruit of arahantship.
Okay, thank you so much, Kili. So here, the Buddha is explaining how you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without having practiced generosity. That if you had selfishness, there's just not any way for you to be able to get to enlightenment. But not only just getting to enlightenment, but even the first, second, third, fourth jhana, which are preliminary phases that the mind experiences on its way to the first stage of enlightenment. And then he says, okay, you're incapable of realizing the first, second, or third, or fourth stage of enlightenment either. This is the stream enter, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. So you would need to be practicing these 5 things. So what are the 5 things that he's talking about? Is selfishness, regard to dwellings. What this is related to is your residence, like where you live. If you weren't willing to share that with other people, if you were possessive over that, your mind hasn't let go. There's still craving and attachment there. So you have friends or family come over and you're interested in sharing your place to stay. This is that you've eliminated the selfishness in regard to your dwelling. Selfishness in regards to families. This is meaning like you're willing to give and share with your family. So if you were holding on and you weren't willing to share with your family, then there's selfishness regarding your family. Selfishness regarding your material possessions. Like, are you willing to share your phone or your computer or your clothes or your jewelry or things like this, your car, your motorbike, your bicycle, your shoes, things like this? Are you willing to share these things? You need to be willing to share those. Otherwise, your mind's holding on to them. And there's this selfishness. Selfishness in regards to praise, meaning you're willing to tell people when they're doing things that are helpful and beneficial, that you're not just pointing out the negativity to people and you're not doing this and you're not doing that and pointing out all the negative things, but you're accentuating the positive is what I refer to it as. You're not selfishness in regard to praising people. Now, you need to be careful with that. If you go extensive amount of praise, people's ego can arise. But if you're never praising people, then your mind is selfish. You're not providing any kind of supportive comments that would be helpful and beneficial and uplifting to people. So you need to find that middle way where you're willing to praise people, but you're not doing it excessively. And then the last one, he says, you need to be not selfish in regards to the teachings, because as you're learning and growing in these teachings and you gain all kinds of wisdom, there's going to be people that are asking you questions about the teachings, and you're going to need to be willing to share with them. But if you're like, oh, I'm too busy, I can't talk about the Buddhist teachings now, I'm out of here, right? Like, this is kind of being selfish. Or if somebody asks you if they can read one of your books, maybe you have a book that has the teachings of the Buddha in it, and someone's like, hey, would you mind if I read your book? And you're like, no, that's my book. You can't have that book. Or maybe somebody asks you to send them a video or a podcast of something that you've been learning, and you're like, no, I don't have time, I'm not going to send that to you. This is like holding back and not being able to give and share the teachings themselves. So these are the 5 things that the Buddha is saying that you need to eliminate any selfishness towards. Your home, sharing with your families, sharing your material possessions, sharing your praise and uplifting comments, accentuating the positive, and also sharing the teachings when people ask. You're not interested in doing that in an unsolicited way. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 20. Without having abandoned selfishness, one is incapable of realizing the fruit of arahantship. Okay, of course, Swiss Cheese has some questions here. Are we equal to heavenly beings? So I think about there's more questions here. Let me back up. Are heavenly beings deities? Are we equal to heavenly beings? Is there more teachings on the selfishness of the teachings? So are heavenly beings deities? No. The way that I understand deities is that these aren't heavenly beings. These are beings that are beyond what the Buddha describes as heavenly being. I don't see anywhere where the Buddha describes what deities are, right? So there's no way for us to make any kind of offering to a deity and see that to be productive. If you're going to offer food and just let it sit out on the street and dry and rot, it would be much better to offer that to a human being that could actually benefit from that. Are we equal to heavenly beings? The way that I see it is that all beings are equal to each other, that there's no beings that are above or below, even though we refer to it as the lower realms and the upper realms or the higher realms. In terms of equality, we should look at all beings as being equal. Is there more teachings on the selfishness of the teachings? You can ask any and all questions that you like. In terms of selfishness of the teachings would be to hold back any kind of teachings. But an individual who's making their way to enlightenment and knowing that these teachings have been very impactful to them, they would be willing to share the teachings, whether it's books or videos or other things like this, live open-handedly related to the teachings itself. All right, Keely, go ahead. You have a question?
Yes, David, I want to ask, how can we show our generosity without arousing others' cravings?
So you can't control whether somebody else has craving or not when you're practicing generosity. Someone very easily could have craving when you're practicing generosity with them. You need to be able to practice generosity for the enhancement of your own mind, and each individual is responsible for their own practice and whether or not their craving is arising. But if you're close to people, like my son, like I can see times when he's really craving something. Like he's been asking me for a bunch of toys and a bunch of things lately. And last night he came to me and he was like, Dad, can you buy me this game? And this game, it was only like $2. And but he had also been asking me many, many different things and purchasing many different things recently. And at first I was looking online, and then ultimately I said, you've been asking a lot of things lately. Would you like to buy this thing, or would you like to get this other thing that we're planning to do tomorrow? And he said, oh, that thing tomorrow would be better. I said, okay, great. But then when it came to this thing that we were supposed to do today, which was go-karting, he was interested to go to this go-kart track. His whole goal today was to come with me to the temple and go to the go-kart track. And he did, some things at the temple. He stayed there for the whole class. We went out to lunch afterwards. We spent time having lunch. And then by the end of lunch, I said, hey, I'm not going to go to the go-kart track. And he said, okay, I'm fine with that. And then we went home. We said we were going to go home. And then when we got home, he said, hey, maybe if it stops raining, we can go to the go-kart track. And I was like, yeah, let's see. And then, I kind of like took my time with it. And then he said, hey, maybe we can go to the go-kart track when you're done playing, I was online playing an online game. And I said, I'm probably not going to go. So, don't worry about it. We just won't go. And he said, okay, no problem. And then when I see that he didn't have craving, he didn't get angry, he didn't get upset, I knew that he wasn't having craving for this particular thing. And then when I was done with my game, I decided to go take him to the go-kart track. So there was 2 different times where I basically told him, it was actually even more than that, but I basically told him that, hey, we're not going to go to this go-kart track. And he dealt with it fine. So I felt comfortable to practice this generosity to take him to go to this go-kart track. So you can kind of look at somebody's mind. If you're practicing really deeply, you can see that if people have expectation that you're going to give them something, they're going to get upset, they're going to get angry, they're going to get discontent. Or when you make an offering to them or you give them something, they're going to get really excited about that. That's the conditioned pleasant feelings. So you'll need to kind of maybe start small and then kind of build from there perhaps, and this will help to kind of throttle their craving. What you can also do is you can change what you offer. Like say there's somebody you're making an offering to regularly, you can change it. So like for me, like I provide money to the temple for electricity and water and things like this, and I bounce it around. I started out really, really low, and then I moved it up higher, and then I went back down, and then I moved it up higher, and then went back down and moved it up higher, so that the monks that I'm offering this to, it doesn't give their mind an opportunity to crave and cling and long and yearn for the amount of money that I might give them for water or electric or things like this. So those are some of the things that you can do, but always remember that each individual person is responsible for their own craving. You're not responsible for those things, but you can function in a way that doesn't allow people to get attached or craving your particular gift or generosity that you're practicing, by you kind of changing up what you choose to do and not having like a set schedule, whereas if like every month on the first of the month you gave somebody $50, then their mind could potentially get attached to that. So you'd like to kind of bounce it around on different days, bounce it around in different amounts, going up and down and up and down. This introduces some impermanence and doesn't allow their mind to cling to it.
Okay, thank you, Teacher David.
You're welcome. All right. So let me see if we have any more remaining questions on YouTube or Facebook. I'm not seeing anything here. Okay, so what I'll do is just end by thanking all of you guys for joining for today's class and remind you that next week we're going to be in chapters 21 through 30, and you're welcome to study those ahead of time. We're in volume 13. You can download it from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions from our temple here in Chiang Mai, or you can order them on Amazon, and that way you can not only read the words of the Buddha, but you have the reference there, and you also have the words and reflections from me to be able to help guide you in implementing and integrating these teachings into your life. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in chapter 6 of this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled The Middle Way, Walking the Middle Way. This is a very simple teaching that you can learn, but it's very profound when you implement it into your life and you understand it. Some of the most simple teaching like this can be very profound because of its simplicity and its ease to apply it to many different things in your life. It can actually be very profound and very impactful. So I'm going to be teaching you that tomorrow in the group learning program. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be in the third part of our 4-part series on Buddhist chanting. So if you'd like to learn Buddhist chanting, you're welcome to attend that live, or you can listen to the recording as well. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Keely, for reading the chapters. I appreciate your help. And perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee Kap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.